My son was sick, so I called my boss and begged her to use my leave. Can't your husband handle it? I'm a single mom. She replied, "Need. We need reliable people here." I hung up. 30 minutes later she panicked when I sent a company-wide email saying, "Can't your husband handle it?" The question came through my phone like she was asking about the weather. Like she hadn't just dismissed my request for emergency leave in the same breath. Like the words weren't dripping with that particular brand of corporate condescension I'd learned to recognize over 6 years. I pressed my palm against my son's forehead. Still burning. He'd thrown up twice since midnight, and his fever had climbed to 103.4 despite the children's Tylenol I'd given him an hour ago. "I'm a single mom," I said, keeping my voice even. "There's no husband. It's just me." Diane paused. I could picture her in her corner office, probably checking her manicure while she processed this information. The same corner office she'd decorated with motivational posters about teamwork and "we're all family here" while simultaneously denying time off requests and scheduling mandatory Saturday meetings. "Well?" She cleared her throat. "Denied. We need reliable people here, and frankly, Rachel, this is exactly the kind of thing I was talking about in your last review. Commitment issues." My son whimpered from the couch. His Spider-Man pajamas were soaked through with sweat. "My son has a fever of 103, I said. "I have 47 days of accrued PTO. I'm asking to use one of them. And I'm telling you no. The Henderson presentation is tomorrow, and I need all hands on deck. Find a babysitter. Call your mother. I don't care what you do, but I expect you at your desk by 9. She made a sound that might have been a laugh. "That's what reliable employees do, Rachel. They figure it out." I hung up. Not dramatically. Not with any particular emotion. I just pressed the red button and set my phone on the coffee table next to the thermometer and the bottle of grape-flavored medicine my son refused to take because it made his tummy feel swooshy. They'd been pushing like this for a while. 6 years I'd worked for Meridian Financial Solutions. 6 years of exceeding every metric, building systems from nothing, training 3 waves of new hires who eventually got promoted over me because they played golf with the right people or laughed at Diane's jokes about the good old days when employees knew their place. I'd started as an administrative assistant. By year 2, I was essentially running the compliance department despite my title never changing and my salary increasing by exactly 2.3% annually, the company minimum. I documented every policy, built the tracking systems, maintained the client databases, and trained every single person who'd cycled through the department. Diane had been my boss for 18 months. She'd come from a competitor with a reputation for shaking things up, which apparently meant micromanaging everyone while taking credit for work she didn't understand. Last quarter, she'd presented my compliance audit framework to the board as her own innovation. The quarter before that, she'd given my annual bonus to her nephew, who'd been hired as a special projects coordinator and spent most of his time watching YouTube videos at his desk. I'd kept quiet. Kept my head down. Kept telling myself that stability mattered more than dignity when you had a 7-year-old depending on you. But sitting there on my secondhand couch, watching my son shiver under a blanket while my boss's words echoed in my head, "Commitment issues. Reliable employees figure it out," something shifted. I picked up my phone and called my neighbor, Mrs. Hendricks. She was 73 years old, had raised 4 kids of her own, and had watched Marcus a handful of times when I'd gotten stuck in traffic or had to stay late for one of Diane's pointless evening meetings. "Ellen? I'm so sorry to call this early. Marcus is sick, and I have something I need to handle at work. Would you be able to sit with him for a few hours? I'll pay you double the usual rate." "Oh, honey, of course. Let me just put on my robe. I'll be over in 10 minutes. I thanked her, ended the call, and opened my laptop. The email took me exactly 22 minutes to write. I didn't rush it. Didn't let anger make me sloppy. I'd spent 6 years building a reputation for precision and thoroughness, and this email would be no different. Subject line: Notice of Resignation and Documentation of Workplace Concerns, Rachel Thornton, Compliance Department. I addressed it to the entire company distribution list, all 412 employees across 7 departments. I CC'd the board of directors, HR, legal, and our external compliance auditors. Then I BCC'd my personal email, just to be safe. The body of the email was structured exactly the way I'd learned to structure compliance reports: clear, factual, devastating. I began with my resignation, effective immediately. I cited the denial of legally protected leave to care for a sick dependent, along with the exact company policy, Section 4.7 of the Employee Handbook, and the state labor statute that Diane had just violated. Then I moved to the documentation. 6 years of meticulous records. Every instance where Diane had denied PTO requests without cause. Every time she'd altered timesheet entries to avoid paying overtime. Every performance review she'd downgraded after employees declined to work unpaid weekends. The Excel spreadsheet tracking her nephew's $78,000 salary against his zero documented productivity. The emails where she'd explicitly instructed me to classify certain client complaints as resolved without actually resolving them, a direct violation of our regulatory requirements. I attached screenshots, timestamps, internal communications she'd sent to me directly, apparently forgetting that compliance officers keep records of everything. The final section was a list of recommendations. Not angry accusations, recommendations. Phrased exactly the way an external auditor would phrase them. Suggesting an immediate internal investigation. Noting which regulatory bodies would need to be notified if certain patterns of behavior were confirmed. Mentioning, almost casually, that the statute of limitations on several of these issues had not yet expired. I read it twice. Fixed a typo in paragraph 7. Adjusted the formatting on one of the attachments. Then I pressed send. Mrs. Hendricks knocked on my door exactly 8 minutes later. She came in with a canvas bag full of chicken soup supplies and immediately started fussing over Marcus, pressing her cool hand to his cheek and murmuring the kinds of grandmother sounds that made sick children feel safe. "You go do what you need to do, dear," she said without looking up. "We'll be just fine here." I kissed my son's forehead, grabbed my keys, and drove to the office. The drive took 14 minutes. I used the time to think through the next steps. The email would have landed in inboxes by now. People would be reading it. Diane would be finding out. I wasn't going there to cause a scene. I was going to collect my personal belongings, return my badge, and make sure I had copies of everything I'd need for whatever came next. The parking lot was already showing signs of chaos when I pulled in. 2 cars were parked at odd angles near the front entrance. Like people had rushed inside without paying attention. Through the glass doors, I could see movement, people walking quickly, clustering in groups, heads bent toward phones. I parked in my usual spot. Force of habit. The lobby receptionist, a young woman named Keisha who I'd trained personally on company phone protocols, looked up when I walked in. Her eyes went wide. "Rachel. Oh my God. Did you really?" "I did." "Holy shit." She covered her mouth immediately, like she'd surprised herself with the profanity. "Sorry. It's just, everyone's reading it. The whole building. Jason from IT printed it out and it's, like, 12 pages. 12 pages. 14, actually. I included the appendices." Keisha just stared at me. I walked to the elevator. 3 people were already inside, and all 3 fell silent when they saw me. One of them, Tom from accounting, who I'd helped correct a reporting error last year that would have cost him his job, gave me a small nod. Not quite approval. But not disapproval either. The 6th floor was pandemonium. I stepped off the elevator into a wall of noise. People talking over each other. Phones ringing and going unanswered. Through the glass walls of Conference Room B, I could see a cluster of senior managers huddled around a laptop, scrolling through something I could probably guess. My desk was in the far corner, near the window with the cracked blinds that maintenance had never gotten around to fixing. I walked toward it, and the noise level dropped perceptibly as people noticed me. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. I reached my desk and began opening drawers. My stapler. A photo of Marcus from his kindergarten graduation. The small cactus I'd bought myself after completing my compliance certification. A mug that said "World's Most Adequate Employee," a gift from a coworker who'd been laid off 2 years ago. I was placing the cactus in my bag when I heard the click of heels behind me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Diane's voice was shrill in a way I'd never heard before. I turned around. She was standing about 6 feet away, her face a particular shade of red that suggested her blood pressure was doing something interesting. Behind her, I could see her nephew Tyler hovering near the break room, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Collecting my belongings," I said. "I'm sure you read my resignation." "That email," she jabbed a finger at me. "That email is going to be the biggest mistake of your pathetic life. You think you can just slander me to the entire company and walk away? I will sue you for defamation. I will destroy your career. I will make sure you never work in this industry again." I zipped my bag closed. "Everything in that email is documented and factual. You're welcome to have your lawyers review it." "Factual?" She laughed, high and tight. "You fabricated all of that. Everyone here knows you've always had a problem with me. This is revenge, pure and simple, because I wouldn't let you skip work to play nurse. To care for my sick child. And the documentation includes emails you sent me directly, Diane. With timestamps. From your company account." Something flickered in her eyes. The first crack in the certainty. "Those emails are confidential. You had no right to. I'm the compliance officer. Maintaining records of potential policy violations isn't just my right, it's my job." I slung my bag over my shoulder. Or it was. Until about 45 minutes ago. I started walking toward the elevator. Diane followed, still talking, her voice getting louder as the reality of the situation apparently began to sink in. You can't do this. You can't just, the board is going to see through this. They know me. They trust me. I've delivered results for this company while you've been hiding in your corner doing paperwork that nobody cares about. I stopped at the elevator and pressed the down button. Turned to face her. The board has already received the email. So has legal. So has our external auditing firm. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. I'd suggest you start thinking about your own next steps. I stepped inside. The doors began to close. This isn't over, Diane shouted. You hear me? This is far from. The doors closed. I rode down to the lobby alone, watching the floor numbers tick by. The elevator music was playing some instrumental version of a song I almost recognized. My hands weren't shaking. I noticed that with a kind of detached curiosity. I'd expected them to be shaking. Keisha was gone from the reception desk when I walked through the lobby. Probably pulled into some emergency meeting somewhere. I pushed through the glass doors and stepped into the morning sunlight. My phone buzzed before I reached my car. A text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Mark Chen, board member. Please call me at your earliest convenience regarding your email. This is urgent. I didn't call. Not yet. I drove home first. Marcus was asleep on the couch when I got back, Mrs. Hendricks sitting beside him with a paperback novel in her lap. She looked up when I came in and put a finger to her lips. His fever's down a bit, she whispered. Took some of the soup broth about an hour ago. Kept it down. I nodded, relief washing through me despite everything else. Thank you, Ellen. I can't tell you how much. Hush. She stood, collecting her things. You take care of that boy. And yourself. She paused at the door, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Whatever's happening at that job of yours, you did the right thing. I've seen how they've treated you. Watched you come home exhausted and stressed for years. You deserve better. I hadn't realized she'd noticed. I hadn't realized anyone had. After she left, I sat on the floor next to the couch where Marcus was sleeping. His breathing had evened out, and some of the color had returned to his cheeks. I watched the gentle rise and fall of his chest and let myself feel, for just a moment, the enormity of what I'd done. Then I pulled out my phone and called the board member back. Mark Chen answered on the second ring. Ms. Thornton. Thank you for calling. His voice was controlled but tense. I'll be direct. Your email has caused significant concern among the board. We've been in emergency meetings since it arrived. I understand. I need to ask, are you willing to meet with us? Today, if possible. We have questions about the documentation you've provided. I looked at Marcus. Still sleeping. Still breathing. I have a sick child at home, Mr. Chen. That's actually why this situation escalated the way it did. A pause. Of course. I apologize. Tomorrow, then? We can arrange whatever time works for you. I thought about the 14 pages of documentation. The 6 years of careful records. The exit interview I'd never gotten to give but had essentially just distributed to everyone who mattered. Tomorrow at 10, I said. I'll come to you. He gave me an address, not the company headquarters, but a law firm downtown. That told me everything I needed to know about how seriously they were taking this. I spent the rest of the day taking care of my son. Made him another batch of soup. Helped him take a lukewarm bath when his fever spiked again around 4 o'clock. Read him 3 chapters of his favorite book about a kid who discovers a secret door to another world. He fell asleep before the kid reached the magical kingdom, but that was okay. We'd finish it tomorrow. My phone buzzed periodically. Emails from former coworkers, some expressing shock, some expressing support, a few from people I barely knew thanking me for finally saying what everyone had apparently been thinking. I didn't respond to any of them. One email stood out. It was from Linda, the HR director, sent from what appeared to be her personal account. Rachel, I can't say much because I'm sure everything is being monitored right now, but I want you to know, you did the right thing. What you documented is just the tip of the iceberg. If the board asks the right questions, they're going to find a lot more than what you sent. I hope they do. I hope they finally clean house, L. I saved that one. Just in case. Marcus's fever broke around midnight. I was dozing in the armchair next to the couch when I heard him stir, and when I checked his temperature, it was down to 99.2. He blinked up at me with clear eyes for the first time in 24 hours. Mom? Did I miss school? Just one day, buddy. You were sick. Oh. He processed this. Can I have crackers? I got him crackers. And a glass of apple juice. And sat with him while he ate them slowly, methodically, the way kids do when they're recovering from something. Mom, why do you look tired? I had a long day too. Because of work? Something like that. But it's okay now. Everything's okay. He accepted this with the easy trust of a 7-year-old, finished his crackers, and went back to sleep. I stayed awake a while longer, watching him. Thinking about the meeting tomorrow. Thinking about the 14 pages of documentation and the 6 years that had led to them. Thinking about Diane's face when she'd realized the emails she'd sent me so carelessly were now attached to a company-wide distribution. I wasn't angry anymore. That surprised me. I'd expected to feel furious, vindicated, righteous. But sitting there in the dark living room, watching my son breathe, I just felt clear. Like a fog had lifted that I hadn't even realized was there. At some point, I fell asleep in the chair. I dreamed of nothing. The law firm's conference room had that particular smell of expensive leather and professional anxiety. 12 chairs surrounded a mahogany table that probably cost more than my car. I sat at one end. 4 board members and 3 lawyers sat at the other. Mark Chen made the introductions. The other board members were a woman named Suzanne something who kept tapping her pen against her notepad, a man in his 60s named Harold who hadn't said a single word yet, and a younger man named David who I vaguely recognized from company photos. The lawyers were from an outside firm. Not Meridian's usual legal team. That told me they were taking this seriously enough to want independent counsel. Ms. Thornton, one of the lawyers began, we want to be very clear about the purpose of this meeting. We're not here to challenge your account or dispute your documentation. The board has reviewed the materials you provided, and they have serious concerns. We're here to ask clarifying questions and to understand the full scope of what you've documented. I nodded. I'm happy to answer whatever questions I can. What followed was 3 hours of the most thorough professional interrogation I'd ever experienced. They asked about the denied PTO requests, how many, how often, the stated reasons. I walked them through my records, showing them the pattern. Employees with children were denied at 3 times the rate of employees without. Single parents were denied at 5 times the rate of married employees. They asked about the timesheet alterations. I showed them the original records I'd preserved alongside the modified versions that had been submitted to payroll. The discrepancies added up to roughly $340,000 in unpaid overtime across 4 years. They asked about Tyler, Diane's nephew. I showed them his employment records. His attendance logs. The complete absence of any documented work product despite his position as Special Projects Coordinator. They asked about the compliance violations. This was where the lawyers leaned in, their expressions sharpening. I explained the pattern of mislabeled client complaints, the audits that had been signed off as complete before the actual work was finished, the regulatory requirements that had been quietly sidestepped because Diane had wanted to hit her quarterly numbers. These compliance issues, one of the lawyers said slowly, if they were to come to light during a regulatory audit, they would trigger an immediate investigation, I said. Potentially significant fines. Possible criminal liability for whoever signed off on the fraudulent reports. I paused. Diane signed off on all of them. The room went very quiet. Mark Chen cleared his throat. Ms. Thornton, may I ask, why didn't you report these issues earlier? Through internal channels? It was the question I'd been expecting. I did, I said. 3 times. I submitted formal concerns to HR on March 15th of last year, June 8th, and October 22nd. I have copies of all 3 submissions. I also have copies of the responses I received, which essentially told me to mind my own business and trust leadership's judgment. I pulled the relevant documents from my folder and slid them across the table. Linda's face had been carefully neutral during all of this, but I saw her jaw tighten when she read her predecessor's dismissive responses. The HR director at the time, Michael Ellis, left the company in January, I continued. He took a position at a competitor. I don't know if his departure was related to these issues, but I noticed that my complaints went unanswered after he left, and no one followed up. More silence. More exchanged glances. Harold, the older board member who hadn't spoken since the meeting began, finally leaned forward. Ms. Thornton, in your professional opinion, as someone who's worked in compliance for 6 years, how much legal exposure does this company face based on what you've documented? I considered the question carefully. Significant, I said. The labor violations alone could result in substantial penalties and back pay requirements. The compliance issues are more serious. Depending on how deep they go, you could be looking at regulatory fines in the millions. And if any of the board members were aware of these practices and failed to act, I let the sentence hang. Harold nodded slowly. Thank you for your candor. The meeting ended with handshakes and business cards and promises to be in touch. The lawyers gathered their notes into expensive leather portfolios. The board members filed out, already murmuring to each other about next steps. Mark Chen caught me at the elevator. Ms. Thornton, Rachel, if I may, I want you to know that regardless of how this situation proceeds, the board is grateful that you came forward. What you've documented represents a serious failure of leadership and oversight, and we take full responsibility for not catching it sooner. Thank you, I said. That means something. There's one more thing. He hesitated. Diane has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of our investigation. We'll be bringing in external auditors to verify everything you've documented, but between us, I don't expect her to return. The elevator arrived. I stepped inside. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said. And I hope you fix it. The doors closed before he could respond. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years. Marcus was well enough to go back to school by Wednesday. I walked him to the bus stop, watched him climb the steps with his Spider-Man backpack bouncing against his back, and waved until the bus disappeared around the corner. My phone rang as I was walking back to the apartment. Rachel? It's Linda. From HR. Do you have a minute? I stopped on the sidewalk. I have several, actually. What's going on? I probably shouldn't be calling you, but I wanted you to hear it from someone who was there rather than through the rumor mill. She took a breath. Diane was terminated this morning. Officially, she resigned to pursue other opportunities. Unofficially, the board gave her a choice between resignation and immediate termination with cause, and she chose the former. That was fast. The documentation you provided made it an easy decision. They verified enough of it within 48 hours to know they had a problem. And Rachel, there's more. The external auditors found additional issues. Things you didn't even know about. Apparently Tyler wasn't just being paid to do nothing, he was also being reimbursed for personal expenses. Travel, meals, a car. All billed to the company as business costs. I leaned against a parking meter, absorbing this. Tyler's been terminated too. And HR is opening a full review of everyone Diane hired or promoted during her tenure. It's a mess. It's a complete mess. Linda paused. But it's a mess that needed to happen. And it wouldn't have if you hadn't done what you did. I appreciate you telling me. There's one more thing. The board asked me to reach out to you, unofficially. They wanted to know if you'd be interested in returning. I actually laughed. The sound surprised me. Returning? To what? To your old position. Or actually, they were discussing something more senior. The compliance violations you uncovered, they need to be fixed, properly. They need someone who understands the systems, knows where the problems are, and can be trusted to do the right thing regardless of politics. She paused again. They were thinking Director of Compliance. New title, new salary, reporting directly to the board instead of through department management. I thought about my desk in the corner with the broken blinds. Thought about 6 years of being overlooked and undervalued. Thought about Diane's voice on the phone, asking why my husband couldn't handle my sick child. Tell them no. Rachel. I'm not interested in going back. Not for any title or salary. I spent 6 years documenting problems that nobody wanted to see. I don't want to spend 6 more years waiting for the next Diane to come along and undo whatever progress gets made. I straightened up, started walking toward my apartment again. But I appreciate the offer. And I appreciate you calling. I understand. If you change your mind. I won't. But thank you, Linda. For everything. I hung up and kept walking. The next few weeks were strange and quiet. I filed for unemployment. Started sending out resumes. Had 3 interviews for positions at other companies, all of which seemed more interested in the gossip about Meridian than in my actual qualifications. I politely declined to discuss my former employer in detail. Some doors closed after that. Others opened. A former coworker, a woman named Priya who'd left Meridian 2 years before for a startup, reached out through LinkedIn. Saw what happened. Are you looking for work? I am. We need a compliance lead. Small team, good culture, 0 Dianes. Interested in chatting? I chatted. The salary was slightly lower than what I'd been making, but the benefits were better and the commute was shorter, and the CEO spent 10 minutes during my interview asking about my son and whether the company's flexible hours would work for my situation as a single parent. I started the following Monday. The Meridian situation continued to unfold in the background of my new life. News filtered through former coworkers and industry contacts. The regulatory investigation I'd predicted was launched. Fines were assessed, 7 figures, according to Linda's last update. Several additional employees were terminated. The board chairman resigned. Diane, I heard, was having trouble finding a new position. Apparently my email had made its way through industry networks, and potential employers were conducting unusually thorough reference checks. I didn't feel guilty about that. I didn't feel much of anything about her anymore. Marcus finished first grade with a glowing report card. His teacher wrote that he was enthusiastic, creative, and exceptionally kind to his classmates. We celebrated with ice cream sundaes and a trip to the Children's Museum where he spent 2 hours building increasingly elaborate structures with oversized foam blocks. Mrs. Hendricks brought us a casserole when she heard about my new job. We ate it together on my living room floor while Marcus showed her his report card and explained, in great detail, the life cycle of butterflies that he'd learned about in science class. Life went on. Different than before, but not worse. Better, maybe. Definitely clearer. One evening about 3 months after everything happened, I was sitting on my couch after putting Marcus to bed when my phone buzzed with an email notification. I almost ignored it. New job, new boundaries, but something made me look. It was from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple, "Thank you." I opened it. "Ms. Thornton. You don't know me, but I used to work at Meridian. I was in accounting. I left about 18 months ago because I couldn't handle the environment anymore, but I never had the courage to say anything about what I saw." When your email went out, I cried. Real tears, sitting at my new desk at my new job, because someone finally documented what we all knew was happening. Someone finally stood up. I just wanted you to know that you weren't alone in seeing it. And you weren't wrong to do what you did. I only wish I'd been brave enough to do the same. Thank you. I hope you're doing well. S. I read it twice. Then I closed my email and set my phone down. Outside, I could hear the neighbors' kids playing some kind of complicated game in the shared courtyard. Marcus's bedroom light was off. He'd actually stayed in bed this time instead of sneaking out to read comic books under his covers with a flashlight. Tomorrow was Saturday. We were going to make pancakes and go to the park and maybe stop by the library to pick out new books. I thought about Diane in her corner office with her motivational posters. Thought about the 14 pages of documentation that had taken 6 years to compile. Thought about the phone call that had started all of this, my son's fever, my boss's contempt, the question that assumed a woman with a sick child must have someone else to handle it. Can't your husband handle it? No. He couldn't. Because he'd left when Marcus was 14 months old and hadn't looked back. Because I'd spent the last 6 years doing everything alone, working, parenting, documenting, surviving. Because some of us don't have the luxury of backup, and we figure it out anyway. And sometimes, when someone mistakes our reliability for weakness, we remind them exactly how much we've been handling all along. I got up, turned off the living room light, and went to bed. The pancakes tomorrow were going to be shaped like dinosaurs. Marcus had requested it specifically. I was already thinking about how to make the Triceratops horns work with batter. Maybe I'd need a squeeze bottle or something. It was going to be a good day. They all were.